Live. I hope that you are doing well. God bless you. Hope that you are doing well and things are going well with you. And I want to talk a little bit today about the pyramids in Nuri. I want to talk about these ancient pyramids in Nuri and talk a little bit about the whole idea of ancient Kush and the idea of how do you make something last. I know today we're dealing with a very serious situation in the Sudan where the National Museum of the Sudan has been looted. It's been overtaken. A lot of the stuff has been robbed, and a lot of things have been destroyed or taken out of the museum because of the war that's going on there. And you think about it, as I think about it, it's such a sad situation. There's so many monuments. There's so many specific things that are significant and that are personal to our history. And if you don't preserve your history, nobody will. And when I think about that, there's a lesson in that. There's a spiritual lesson as we start to think about the pyramids at Nuri and what they are, and we'll jump into that in just a minute. But that whole idea that, it's up to you even personally. I mean, it's up to us collectively, obviously, for us to remember the dead. It's up for us to remember our history. It's up to us to lift our ancestors up. They're already on the other side. They have their energy. They've done what they've had to do. They've passed the torch on to us. They're doing whatever they need to do there. It's up to us to connect with them. It's up to us to remember them and to hold up the ideals and the things that we remember about them so that we have it in the land of living. And it's not just, collectively, it's up to you and I, spiritually, individually. Even if you can't get somebody in a whole nation to do it, you can do it individually. And what you do in your home, and the biggest monument that you have to your ancestors, the biggest monument you have anywhere, the biggest monument you have to God to anywhere is the one that you carry in your heart, the one that you leave with others, the one that you carry in your mind, that you carry in your spirit every day. So in that idea, in that kind of context, I want to talk about the pyramids at Nuri because they represent a significant thing. And thank you so much for those who are joining us. Very much appreciated. They represent a significant part of ancient, Kushite history, ancient Kemetic history, and ancient history from an African standpoint. And the thing that jumps out at me when you look at ancient Kush, what jumps out at me is the longevity of what they were able to put in place. Being able to put in place, pyramids and put in place a society that lasted for well over 1,000 years is significant. And one of the places I want to kind of just drill down on is the whole cemetery at Nuri. So what is Nuri? Where is it at? Let's kind of jump into that right now and get a chance to talk about it. So I'll kind of put this in here and I'll blow this up. And if you are a member here on YouTube, I very much appreciate it. I thank you. It only starts at $4.99 a month. You have access to this. So this is one of the timelines and that you have access to already on the site. And if you go to our member area where the posts are, the community posts, you go to the members only post, you'll see how to access all that content, the online courses, the downloadable resources, this resource that I'm talking about now, you'll be able to see it, and other resources that I'm going to be uploading soon. So there's a whole library of resources there for you to take a look at. But as we look at the pyramids of Nuri, we are talking about ancient Kush. And we're talking about ancient Kush and the very famous, people like to call them the 25th dynasty. I like to say they were their own dynasty in their own right. They had their own kingdom that they were ruling when they took over, and they came and took over Kemet. By the way, it was peaceful, much of it, at least the southern part of Kemet when they came in. But they had their own dynasty in their right. So first of all, let's talk about where we're talking about. So just kind of making this a little bigger so you just get an idea. If you think about the Nile and you think about Upper Kemet and you think about, obviously Upper Kemet is the southern part, and you think about Lower Nubia is right here, is north, and Upper Nubia is going to be the southern part as well. So we're talking about the area that's solely within modern day Sudan, that's squarely within modern day Sudan, north of where Khartoum is. And this area right around here, right around the fourth cataract of Nile, it has some very significant historic places when it comes to Kushite history, some very significant and historic places right here. Right around this area, you have the pyramids at Nuri, and these wonderful pyramids here, and they're there in kind of sections. You have pyramids that are there for the kings and the rulers and the suits, if you will, as well as for their queen mothers, as well as for their wives that are right around here. And this cemetery here at Nuri is a collection of pyramids, as I mentioned, some remarkable pyramids that are there. And part of a large number of pyramids, you probably know there are quite a bit of number of pyramids in the Sudan, in modern day Sudan, that are left over from antiquity. They come from a lot of the places that we have right around there in the fourth cataract. And then as you go farther south to Merowe, around the fifth and sixth cataract, you have a number of other pyramids, which we'll probably talk about in a later date. But getting back to this, so Nuri's right here around the fourth cataract, and there's some very important, significant things that are right here. You have Napatan, which is the city, or at one point in time was the capital of ancient Kush during this period of time. So I'm talking in the 8th century BC, 7th century B, 6th century BC. It was the capital of ancient Kush during that period of time. And we'll talk more about that. But for a significant period of time, it was the capital of ancient Kush. And we call the rulers there, they're referred to as Napatan rulers, the Napatan dynasty, because they were able to keep their dynasty intact for a significant period of time without apparently these kind of usurpations, or without apparently, at least I don't know of, and I can do more research. I'd love to hear if you know of the killings and the murdering that you hear in a lot of the dynasties and a lot of the kingdoms around the world. Whatever was taking place there, they were able to keep their dynasty intact for a largely peaceful way. And we can look at there and see if there was some additional things that took place. I'd love to find out more about it. I just haven't seen a lot of that in my studies of them, and I'd love to find out more about it. But they were definitely able to keep their dynasty together for a long period of time. So they're right here, focused right around Napata, right near the fourth cataract of the Nile, and there's several important places. El Kuru, the first place right here, El Kuru, is a cemetery. And some of the early dynastic leaders of this particular Napatan dynasty in ancient Kushite history, starting in around 900 BC or thereabouts, some of the early leaders and after that are buried right here in El Kuru. And it isn't until we get to the time of Taharqa, who we'll talk about in just a minute, King Taharqa, who's right here, that people started moving their burials, if you will, to that whole area of Nuri, that whole area. They started moving their burials there. It wasn't until Taharqa. And so in that area is El Kuru, there's Napata. El Kuru is a cemetery. Nuri is also a cemetery. Napata is the city, the capital city. And Jebel Barkal is a huge sacred mountain, a huge mountain that we will talk more about, because it's one of the holiest sites in that area of Kush. Throughout their history, it's one of the most holy sites there. It was a holy site for the Kushite people for well over for 1,000 years, more than 1,000 years, and it was a holy site for the Kemetic people, especially when they came down to Kush and took over for a period of time, about 400 years, 400 or 500 years. They looked at the mountain that was right there at Jebel Barkal as being a holy mountain, and that their supreme deity, Amen, the supreme deity, Amen, God, was looked at to be housed in that mountain. And when you think about ancient Kemetic people talking about their ancestors coming from the south, talking about the God's land being farther south in ancient Punt, that whole idea to look south and to go south and to find an area and artifacts or land masses and sacred things that you would consider to be sacred is not foreign, obviously. It's something that they did, and they certainly did that in Jebel Barkal, which was a holy mountain where there are a number of temples there, which we'll talk about probably at a later date, because that's a significant part of Kushite history and ancient Kemetic history, to the point where they called Amen of this area, like Amen of Napata. They literally called Amen, as Amen was in that mountain in this general part of what is today the Sudan, right around here on the fourth cataract of Nile. So you have El Kuru, which is a cemetery, a royal cemetery for some of the early dynastic leaders. You have Napata as the capital city. You have Jebel Barkal, which is a holy mountain, and you have the site of Nuri, which is what we're going to talk about today. The site of Nuri, which is a significant pyramid site. It's a cemetery, if you will. And we're going to talk a little about this. So as we start to talk about Nuri and we say, why is it significant? How can you keep something going for years and years and years? We have to talk about now who, right? So we found out where Nuri is. Let's talk about who. Let's kind of look at this timeline. And as I mentioned, if you are a member here on YouTube, if you're a member, you have access to this. So I very much appreciate and thank you for supporting, and even the $4.99 a month, it goes along with just supporting. I appreciate your support. So as we look at this whole idea, this whole timeline right here, you can see parts of Kushite history, right? You see parts of Kushite history where it was in Middle Kerma. Kerma was the city that was the original, one of the early cities. You go in 3000 BC, 3500 BC, an earliest site right around the third cataract of Nile, just north of Jebel Barkal, north of Napata, where there was a city, an urban area that was a center for trading there in ancient Kush around 3000 BC and thereabouts. And you see a period of time, we have Middle Kerma, your classic Kerma. We've talked about this before, and we'll continue to talk about them some more. And you have a period of time where they are a major trading partner up and down the Nile. They are a major trading partner with the people to the north of them, ancient Kemet, and even going into the Mediterranean and going farther south, and them going farther south in Africa. They are a major trading hub, if you will, for things going north and south, and really east and west, because you might as well say Punt as well, because there's some evidence that when Hatshepsut went on her famous expedition to Punt, that on the way back, she came back through Nubia, through Kush, and brought people back with her from there as well. So it's not just Punt that she talks about. They also talk about other people that they brought back that were on the way back north as they were traveling from Punt. So this whole area you can see is is a whole a part of Kushite's timeline, if you will, part of its history. And as we look at that and kind of move back and forth, I'll kind of move over, and you start to see as we get into classic Kermas, when they are the height of their tombs, the height of their tomb building. They have a lot going on in that period of time, and this is before Taharqa. This is before ancient Kemet comes and takes them over. They're doing a lot on their own before that takes place, and it's worth a whole lot of study when you look at that. Thank you so much. God bless you. Thanks for joining. I do much appreciate it. Thank you so much. Give thanks so much. Appreciate the fist up. So appreciate it. Thank you very much. God bless you. So they did a whole lot before the New Kingdom even came there, and then you have a period of time from about 1500 or 1550 or thereabouts to about 1070 with a new kingdom where ancient Kemet is in control. That the 18th dynasty, the 19th dynasty, and so forth, even Tutankhamun, people all the way down there are in control of Kush. And you find them building temples and building all types of things at that time. And they are celebrating Amen. And you find that a lot of the old customs that were also there as a part of Kush, even though they shared a shared heritage, obviously over years of time, you have some things that are different. But when they came in there was a lot of things that were just meshed together. I mean, that was the way, and that's the African way in a lot of ways. You just blend things together. So a lot of the temples, some of the temples that were there dedicated to Kushite royalty, Kushite temples in general, were left in place. Some of them were left in place by the Kemetic people and just built Kemetic temples right alongside them, just built right alongside them and just kept on moving, which is an interesting story because you start to see that there's a camaraderie there, there's a syncretism there, and there's a meshing of religions and belief, right, if you will, that's taking place at that time period. God bless you. Thanks so much for joining. I very much appreciate it. Thank you so much. And so then as we start to look at it, we start to come into a period of time where there's a bit of renewal and there's a resurgence. So just as we mentioned that Kush is significant during this whole period of time, right? And you have, thousands of years of history, you start to see after the New Kingdom control, you start to see a period of renewal. And during that period of renewal, you have a rise of the Napatan dynasty. This is like the Napatan period. And so this period right here starts around 900 BC. And as that's starting around 900 BC, thank you so much for joining. God bless you. As that's starting around 900 BC, you start to see these rulers come into place. And these rulers that are coming into place, starting with Alara and Kashta and Piankhy or and Shabaka and Shipitu and Taharqa, you start to see these rulers come into place, and they are significant rulers. And we're going to do a lot more talking about them because I love talking about this dynasty. It's a remarkable family because all the people I just named and we're going to talk about, for the most part, they're related. We're talking literally about family. We're talking about like father, grandfather, great-grandfather, great-great-grandfather, great-great-great-grandfather, and grandmothers and things. This is a family. And we think about it, this remarkable family is together for hundreds of years, right? Maybe over 1,000 years, where they are literally passing down, tool after tool, generation after generation, beliefs and their belief system and customs and tradition, they're passing down. And so we get all the way down, and I want to take a little bit of an even closer look. I'll kind of school over here. And as I mentioned, if you are a member of us on YouTube, you have access to this. So you can download this and take a look at it. I want to kind of jump into this one a little bit because this is talking specifically about that Napatan dynasty that's right there around the fourth cataract of Nile, talking about that Napatan dynasty and giving us a chance to kind of look at this because this Napatan dynasty becomes significant, in my opinion, because there's so much that they're able to do. And when we talk about preserving history, I really think the Kushite people give us some understanding and some insight as to how do you preserve family history? How do you preserve your traditions? How do you make something last for well over for like 1,200 years? Something that was dying someplace else. Something that a lot of people can't hold together. I mean, a lot of people cannot have, dynasties that last that long where they're literally passing it down from one member to the next, blood relatives, or traditions that last that long, right? Or even in a situation where the Kemetic kingdom was having challenges and was coming apart, and some of their customs were being changed, even when the Greeks came in and so forth, they were still practicing, they were still looking at these traditions and doing this for a long period of time. Even after the Romans came, you still had them in ancient Kush practicing these ways and holding on to this, even after it was beginning to fall in ancient Kemet. The Kushite people were lifting it up in a lot of these traditions. And King Taharqa becomes a significant person in that whole dynasty, if you will. So let's just talk about it. So this Napatan period starts around 900 BC. right there around 900 BC. And literally, Alar is considered to be the first person of that. He's considered to be the first person that we know of in terms of a name, who's there in that area. He's the first person. And his brother, Kush, is the one who starts to really take over the upper part of Kemet. So he takes over the southern part of Kemet. At this time, Alar has already begun to unify that whole version of Kush. So during this whole renewal period where things are going on, Alara is the one is unifying that whole area and making northern Kush and southern Kush come together. It's kind of one place view. He's doing that work right there. And his brother Kashta comes in and he extends the kingdom into lower Nubia, as I mentioned, and all the way up into southern Kemet. So that upper part of Kemet, that southern Kemet, he extends the kingdom beyond the Nubian, traditional Nubian borders, if you will. And it is basically the king, and he is ruler. The whole, Epedisut, the temple at Karnak, they are looking, the priest of Amen, they are looking at Kashta as being their ruler, right? As we start to think about it. And it's Piankhy, or Pai, if you like to say it, Pia, he comes and he takes over all of Kemet. So he is the famous king and ruler Nasut who takes over all of Kemet. So all of this is happening. You find that very interestingly, the first several leaders of this. So Alar, Kashta, Piankhy, Shabaka, and Shabiku, they're all buried at El Kuru. So we talked about El Kuru before. They're buried at El Kuru, which is a specific, as I mentioned, cemetery, royal cemetery. And it isn't until you get to Taharqa. Taharqa begins to kind of break with the tradition, and he has his burial site at Nuri. So when we think about some of these wonderful pyramids and some of these wonderful structures, this is Taharqa who's beginning to starting this tradition of this burial ground, this royal burial ground right there in Nuri, and not just in El Kuru. And as I kind of take this away and kind of give you some specific stuff, you get to see that these are kind of remarkable structures in themselves. And these are structures that are still saying they're badly weathered, they're badly beaten, right? But they are still standing after thousands of years. They are still there, and they're a testament to, even though they've been looted and they've been destroyed in many ways, a lot of them have had groundwater coming in because of underwater water tables. They've had people loot them over thousands of years. People have attacked them, but remarkably, their voices are still being heard, and Taharqa is still being heard. So in this whole cemetery that is Nuri, Taharqa is the first ruler, the first Nasut in the Kushite line, if you will, that has his pyramid built in Nuri. And he builds this pyramid in this new burial ground. And after him, Tuetamani, who is the son of his predecessor, goes back to El Kuru. But after that, all of these rulers, all of these, for almost every single one of them, and these are all directly Taharqa's children. So his children, his sons, his grandsons, these are all of them, all of his line, if you will, his heritage, they have their pyramids right here at Nuri. So you see that whether it's Atlanursa or Anlamani or Aspelta or Amalkaka, you have them all. Atlanursa, as I mentioned, they're building their pyramids in Nuri, following the lead of Taharqa, if you will. They're following his lead. So when you start to see these pyramids, these remarkable pyramids, you start to know that this becomes a significant burial ground in ancient Kushite history. And even from a Kemetic standpoint, in terms of belief, it becomes a significant burial ground in their history. And Taharqa is the one who started it, right? So if you're thinking about you even taking notes, I suggest you jot this down, write it down. I want you to know about it. You think about the pyramids at Nuri, think about the Nuri pyramids, write it down, let's know more. And that's why I'm including things on my website about it. But I want you to know. So it's the Nuri pyramids, and he is starting a whole royal cemetery. And it's not just him, right? He's not just putting himself there, obviously, right? Because at the period of time you have, at his height, there were probably over 80 pyramids that were in this area. From this area, there's probably over 80 pyramids that were in this area at some point in time up there in Nuri. And you had not just him, it was queen mothers, right? Not just queen mothers, there were royal wives that were there, family members that were there. So you find people like Nasala, which I love her name, right? She's one of his offspring's children, or daughter-in-law, if you will, one of his offspring's wives, main wife, Nasala. She's a queen that's buried there. So several of the queens themselves, several of the queen mothers, and maybe other family members are buried at Nuri in these Nuri pyramids. And it was all kind of started by Taharqa. He's the one who kind of started this off. And you can go down this entire line. So as you think about it, just to put your mind into perspective, right? So you go from about 900 to about 300 BC. So literally almost about 300 BC. So you're talking like, several hundred, 600 years of the Napatan dynasty, right? Of the Napatan era, if you will. But as you start to think about Nuri itself, from around 660 or thereabouts, when Taharqa is using it as his burial site, all the way down this line. So let's just go down this line as you kind of look at it and kind of see from Taharqa to Atlanursa and to Seneskin and to Mia Espelta. You start to go down this whole line. Almost every single one of them have their pyramids at Nuri, all the way till you get down to Natasan. And Natasan, he becomes the last person, the last ruler to have his pyramid built in his burial ground built in Nuri. And the interesting thing about the Nuri pyramids that you can see, they're steeper, right? So they built theirs at a different angle. They built theirs in a steeper way than what they did in ancient Kemet. It was steeper, and almost every single of these pyramids had on the east side, on the east face of the pyramid, was a chapel. And that chapel was an ancestral chapel, really, where you would come and you would give offerings and remembrance to whoever the pyramid was for. And the pyramid was built above ground, obviously, but underneath there would be rock, right? Just rock hewn chambers. So they might be 1, 2, 3, depends upon the situation. There would be chambers underneath, and they would be kind of barrel kind of shaped, if you will. And they were there. They had columns holding them up, depending upon, the pharaoh, the ruler, and what they put in place. But they were literally subterranean rock hewn chambers. That's where the burials were. So they were actually interred and buried underground in these subterranean, chambers. And the pyramid was built on top. So when you see these pyramids, you take a look at them, you get the idea that the pyramid is on top, and it's not like, it's carved inside of it, like, like in the Great Pyramids. It's not carved inside of it. You actually got to look down beneath that, and that's where you will find the actual bodies of. And in the Nuri pyramids, you would find sometimes King Taharqa, I think, had over 1,000 shaptis, like this little image or an image made of him, built to kind of help them and be protectors and servants in the afterlife. He had like over 1,000 of them. They had all kinds of beautiful pottery. They made some of the best pottery in the world at that time. That's one of the things they're known for. If you look at the Museum of Fine Arts, the MFA in Boston, where they did a lot of these excavations in the early 1900s, they talk about just the exquisite pottery through this whole history of just not just Napatan, but Kush period and the Kerma period, where they have some of the finest pottery that they'd ever seen in antiquity. So you have a lot of pottery, you have fine jewelry. Obviously, there's a lot of gold in this area, so that's one of the things they're known for. Faience, kind of glassed, kind of beads and jewelry made of that. So this was a significant society, and you find that these Nuri pyramids, started by King Taharqa himself, are kind of the culmination of a long line of things that are happening. So they're a culmination of a lot of things that are happening. So this whole renewal period that's taking place during the Napatan dynasty is a part of, a whole long history of things that are taking place in this area that, after New Kingdom control, after they kind of, got rid of the New Kingdom and began to reorganize themselves, this development of the pyramids at Nuri is kind of a culmination of them really rising up and accepting the religion and really carrying on the religion of the Kemetic people. And it isn't until after about 300, maybe it was 310 BC, that you start to see them change the burial place, the royal burial place, to Meroe. And Meroe is farther south. It is by the 5th and 6th cataract of the Nile. And Meroe becomes the second great center, if you will. And there's many, many pyramids. I think I believe there are more pyramids in Meroe than there are in north of it. But they also carry on for hundreds of years, where they have pyramid buildings, and they continue to push forward their idea, their religion, and all of it they're pushing forward. So as you start to think about ancient Kush, think about 3 kind of great burial grounds, even though there are others. But you think about El Kuru as being one of the ones that's there for the early Napatan dynastic period. Think about El Kuru, think about the actual one at Nuri, and then later on it's Meroe, right? So you have 3 very significant areas where there are cemeteries, and you find a lot about them. So you find that in the Nuri area, they probably had the cemetery for some 350 years. So it was going on from the time of Taharqa all the way down to Natasan, who was the last person to have his pyramid and his family buried there. So about 350 years. So, 3.5 centuries they're burying there, and they're keeping up these traditions. And stop for a minute and think, 350 years. What are you doing that you have that for 350 years, where you can allow your family and your family's family and your children and your children's children and the whole extended family to be a part of this one great burial site, which speaks to their connectivity. It speaks to the centralization of their authority, their ability to get together to do these projects, because these were not easy things, obviously, to build. They were not easy things to put together. It speaks to their continuity. I think that's something that you and I can learn from. I think there's something we can learn from. And even when they move it from there to Mirway, it goes on for another 600 years. So 600 or 700 years. You have a significant period of time where I believe the Kushite people, in particular Taharka, because he was one of the ones who stood out, but a whole lot of them, his family was just a remarkable family. A whole lot of them stand out. They're telling us how to keep a tradition going. They're telling us how to keep your family going. They're telling us not to forget our traditions. Don't let it go. Don't think that the ceremonies you perform or some of the things that you might do that they mean nothing. Don't think that you don't have to make that phone call. Don't think that you don't have to remember your ancestors, because it isn't just the family that you keep together. You actually keep together your own identity. You actually keep together your ability to be spiritually successful. You actually keep together your ability, your family's success when you maintain these types of things. So I'm interested about it. I'm going to see what's in the comments down below. God bless you. Thank you so much for your comments there. I appreciate it. That's, you're keeping together a lot when you do this. Thank you. We keep it together a lot. Thank you, Roger. Thank you, Devin. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. So yeah, you're keeping together a lot when you keep together families and you keep together pyramids. So as you think about that, I just want to say again, and if you were able to kind of just jot down this or something, or remember some of this, you think about the Nuri pyramids, think about Nuri, think about El Kuru as being places where you can talk about, and King Taharka becomes a significant person that jumps into that. And these may be some of the further pyramids that are up north, but you can take a look at how they're steeper. So you have like a narrower part up top than you have in like some like the Great Pyramid, so to speak. And you also have, the subterranean part is where you would find the actual burials away. So they're underneath the ground. You can't see them. They're buried. And a lot of times you will see a stairway on the eastern side along with the chapel where they would go and they would remember people. And that whole chapel was there. And so they have that whole base, and it's just kind of interesting because you have a slightly different, form of putting forth this, and you have a slightly different form of worship and of remembrance as you think about that. So I'd like to share that. I'd like to hear more of your comments. I'm going to be putting out more information on this, and not just information, documentation. So I hope you get a chance to look at it, read the stuff that I put out there. If you get a chance to, God bless you. I thank you so much for listening, and I hope you join me again soon. Thank you very much.